Hello everyone and welcome back to another exciting edition of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt, the Gameboy, talk you through the highs and the lows of the Gameboy library, one card at a time. This week we'll be looking at one of the lows in my opinion. It's Star Wars. So let's talk about Star Wars, as well, with the new film out it's hard to escape right now. There are parody videos, trailers, toys and everything in between. Apart from the newly released The Force Awakens, a little closer to home in the good old land of video games is Star Wars Battlefront, DICE's new first-person shooter set in a galaxy far, far away, which, to be honest, I've been able to enjoy in small doses recently, but I know isn't for everyone. So, I assume many people filled with nostalgia or rage at J.J. Abrams, depending on what side of the coin the new Star Wars movie lands on, will be clamouring to game on systems from a long, long time ago. It's because of this I offer a public service announcement to all fans of Nintendo's 8-bit handheld: stay the hell away from Star Wars, as it's a pretty crummy game. Why am I putting this right at the start of the video? Because those who are tempted and who won't watch the entire episode need to know at least that much. But for those who want to know why, we're going to need to go a little bit more in depth in order to answer that. Star Wars is a game based off of the 1977 movie of the same name, and was originally developed in 1991 for the Famicom and NES by Beam Software. The following year, a port of the game that was developed by NMS Software to everyone's favourite handheld, while the Game Gear version of the game was made by T-Rex Design. These three versions of Star Wars, while they are essentially the same game, all differ in their own ways, but unfortunately in my opinion share a lot of the same flaws. While I'm not the biggest fan of any of the versions of this game I've played, the Game Boy outing is definitely the weakest of them. The game sees you roughly follow the narrative structure of the original entry into the Star Wars saga, by informing you that R2-D2 has escaped and that you need to find him. He of course leads you to Obi-Wan, who wants to go to Alderaan, etc, etc. The game naturally takes liberties with how these story beats connect to each other in order to make a video game. However, it is my opinion that Beam are a little bit too loose in sticking to the source material and their explanations of what you have to do in the game. Having expected you to have seen Star Wars, the game gives you story beats from the movie that you're supposed to follow, however they don't actually tell you what you're supposed to do in the game world. For example, right at the start of the game, you're explained that you need to find R2-D2. You see, instead of explaining to you where you need to find R2, the game essentially dumps you in the middle of a desert and challenges you to find him by driving around in your land speeder, exploring various locations. Then you need to do this for Obi-Wan and every other character in the game. Be it figuring out you need to go into the canteen for Han Solo, or the less obvious searching of the detention level for Leia. But to be even in with a chance of getting these characters, you're going to need to rely on more than sheer luck of finding the right cave to enter, but also in your ability to fight enemies and platform. The jumping in this game feels a little off, but what's worse is the combat. Luke starts off with a terrible blaster before inheriting Anakin's lightsaber from Obi-Wan a few levels in. But even the lightsaber is bad in this game. It takes a lot of practice to be able to swing it properly, but when you do, it sounds more like a cat's meow than a lightsaber swoosh. Its visuals, all things considered, do look okay. With its roots lie more firmly in the NES title than the arguably superior Game Gear game, Star Wars aims to emulate the console experience on a handheld platform. In order to maintain the high integrity of sprite work from the console version, they take up a huge portion of the screen, zooming in the gameplay and making some of the jumps that were intolerable to begin with into a straight up train wreck of level design on the handheld. Also, without the colours of the NES title, it can be very hard to read what's simply the background and what possesses a threat to Luke, which is a massive problem, as while Luke has lives, Han and Leia do not, meaning that if they die, they can be revived by talking to Obi-Wan in the character select screen a total of 5 times before they're simply unusable, which is a pain in the ass, as because both of them are much nicer to play with than Luke. Sure, Luke's lightsaber is a very powerful weapon, But as I've previously mentioned, it's very cumbersome, and as every other enemy in the game fires a blaster, you will need to get the timing down to a T to even stand a chance with it. And not to mention that his blaster is definitely the worst weapon in the game. Han and Leia, however, possess more powerful guns that you will really need in the later stages of the game in order to clear the waves of stormtroopers. Platforming is not the only thing you do in Star Wars, however, as there are a few sections in which you fly the Millennium Falcon. Once to navigate through the asteroid field that was once Alderaan, and again to shoot down TIE fighters while escaping the Death Star. While the asteroid section can be cheesed by simply holding down either left and down or right and down, the TIE fighter section is a nightmare to get through, as it's not simply about killing TIE fighters, but also shooting down their missiles as to not hurt the Falcon. The controls in this section are not exactly precise, and it takes very little to destroy the ship. More annoyingly, once you die, you only have 4 chances to beat the stage, even if you have all 9 of the continues the game grants you before you hit a game over screen. This is extremely fucking frustrating, because I found out why I was failing so hard at this section, and it was because right at the start of the game, I should have gone through all of the caves on Tatooine, fought through all of the bullshit to get shields for the Falcon, something I didn't even have at that point of the game, was never told I needed, and even when I found out, had no way of going back to get them once I'd left the planet. It was at this point I simply had to put the controller down and walk away. Any game that punishes a player for missing an item right at the start of the game without telling them it exists isn't worth the hassle of learning to beat, in my opinion. There's also a trench run section at the end of the title, but from what I hear, this is also very cheap to the player as well. In short, Star Wars really doesn't live up to the movie it shares a name with. It's infuriatingly difficult at points, doesn't explain any of the objectives to the player, and is very fast and loose with its representation of the source material. In fact, the only thing I really like about this game is its music, as the Game Boy version of the Cantina theme is sick. However, the score is even limited compared to the NES version, so if you want to play any version of Star Wars, either visit the NES, Game Gear or Master System versions of it. But the important thing to remember is that this Game Boy game is not the title you were looking for. Please, Game Boys and girls, move along. And that brings us to the end of another Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. If you have, please subscribe to the channel and share it around with people you think may be interested in it, as that is how this channel grows and how I can do more content. Yay! If you have already subscribed and told us some other people, why not check out some more of our videos, namely the Boyographic series, where I look at the highs and lows of the Game Boy library, one card at a time, every week on a Friday. You can also check out some of our Boy Curious videos, where I look at bootlegs and oddities for the system, as well as some All of the Glory videos, where I play through a game, cutting out all the deaths, leaving you with none of the faff, but all of the glory. Until next week, Game Boys and girls, you can find me on Twitter at Gameboy. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Boyographic. And that will be all from me. Game on.